Okay, well, guys, thank you very much for meeting up today. Julien Allen and Samir Nathwani from Trowers Hamlins, welcome. So I think to begin the conversation today, it would be great just to get a little bit of background about you guys and what you guys are doing at Trowers Hamlins.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Julien Allen, as you said. I'm a commercial real estate partner here at Trowers Hamlins. A little bit about Trowers first. We're a 250-year-old law firm, and our principal driver is real estate work. We work across the spectrum of real estate, from public and private sector to all sorts of different client bases across the world. We have clients all over the UK and from the Middle East and the Far East and from North America as well. Myself, I had a fairly typical commercial property background. Became a development lawyer for the first 10 years and then moved into other areas. And I essentially do commercial investment as well as corporate occupier work.
Brilliant, thank you.
So I'm Samir Nathwani, as you said. I joined Trowers as a young NQ, fresh-faced, and joined Julien's team. So a lot of what I do is similar to what he does. I'm now a partner here at Trowers. But yeah, kind of a lot of institutional investment work and a lot of occupier-led work, like Julien said.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that introduction. For those of you who don't know me, I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Jatin Ondia, CEO of Shojin Property Partners. Shojin Property Partners specialises in providing investment into the real estate development sector here in the UK. And we then fractionalise that investment for investors globally. So today we have investors in over 50 countries, apart from focusing on the development side of the market, we also from time to time acquire assets on behalf of our global client base. So, guys, thank you very much for joining me today. Let's move into what's going on in the market. So let's start with the political and economic environment. It's been a bit of a mess and a bit of chaos for the past few years. What are you feeling right now in the market? Are you seeing, is there light at the end of this tunnel?
I think what the market craves is certainty, or a bit more of it. We need to get closer to an area where people can feel comfortable about what's coming. And I think, unfortunately, we've been hit by one thing after another in the last 8 or 10 years, frankly. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and that is being felt. The simple answer to the question about political outlook is that there is a new government about to happen in this country.
So you firmly believe Labour's in?
Well, I think that's pretty much a certainty. Yeah. The key thing is, what will that mean? And I think there's a lot of speculation. Part of Labour's problem is that it can't entirely be totally open and frank about what it wishes to do, which is an interesting aspect of our electoral cycle, which is that, generally speaking, Labour need to be cagey if they're going to attract the relevant amount of votes. So we are uncertain about specifically what they're going to do, but there are some certainties around the new government which I think are providing a little bit of comfort. There's a feeling of grown-ups back in the room, and there's a feeling of a necessity to make some transformative changes by hook or by crook. Otherwise, it'll be seen as a missed opportunity for a new government like that.
But would you say, Labour obviously has moved away from the kind of far left, it's kind of moving back towards the middle, and they are trying to get everyone to believe that they are on the side of business. They've been doing a lot of work trying to woo people in the city.
Yeah.
What do you feel? Is that genuine? I mean, if you look at the last kind of decade of Labour thought and Labour policies that they were trying to push out there, it was very, very left wing, and that was one of the biggest dangers, right? That it moves away from the centre and it affects business. I mean, we've already seen VAT on school fees is going to be one of the things coming in. Mm-hmm. How do you think it's going to play out for businesses? Maybe.
Yeah, well, I think this is the interesting thing at the moment. Like Julien said, they're being a bit coy on the spectrum of policies right now. But what we do know is that the British public are fed up of loads of different Conservative parties or types of Conservative parties coming in. You've had Truss, you've had Rishi Sunak, you've had Boris Johnson, and they're all a bit different, and they want more stability, like Julien said. So there's this coyness around specific policies and where the future's going to go, but I think you're right that there has to be more of a balance. So I think Labour themselves don't really know the direction they're going to go in, and they're going to spend the early years just feeling out what the public wants and needs, and also that'll be a bit based on kind of what's happening in the economy, and then kind of will reach a neutral result.
I would say it's an electoral device to cozy up to business. They understand how to get themselves elected, which is to be friendly with business. However, that wing of the party that is currently in charge of the party is sympathetic and realistic about the need for private and public to be operating on all cylinders. So my sense is that we are going to have a new government which is going to feel fairly centrist. It's going to feel like some old Conservative governments used to feel. And that is partly because they need some electoral stability, and partly because the country cannot afford to be lurching into sort of more radical thinking. Right now, the country needs something very stable and sensible.
Yeah, definitely. And so it almost feels like they're almost pulling the old Tony Blair trick, kind of move it into the middle.
I think so.
Keep everyone slightly happy, nobody very happy, kind of, just get things stable. So, no, I think that's great. They're inheriting a very economically unstable environment. We've had a lot going on over the past few years. Obviously, interest rates shot up. Inflation is still being stubborn. Rates will eventually come down. But economically, I always say you've got to stop at some point and look at us from outside, on the world stage. I talk to international investors and they're looking at the UK saying, you guys are a basket case at the moment. I mean, what are you feeling about the economic environment now and then moving forward over the next year or so?
Yeah, well, right now it's about, again, stability. We're going to keep using that word, but what we have right now is high inflation. Yes, it's steadying, but we're still at a higher rate of inflation than we want. We've got high wage growth, which is stopping that inflation rate from coming down. We have decent levels of employment, so that's good, but I think we need 6 to 12 more months of inflation coming down. And I think if you asked us in October, November last year, everyone was saying, oh, the interest rate should start to come down in May, that we're there now. But now the market is saying, well, at the earliest, we're looking at August. So I think we've still got a few months to ride out before things start to settle. And that's the economic outlook.
I think the challenges facing the UK are greater now than they were, say, in 1997, if we're talking about new change of regime. We are in a period not only of economic decline, relative economic decline, and we can all rehearse the reasons why we're here. But where we are also is, I think we're at a disadvantage in terms of our credit rating as a country. If you like, you could argue that we're paying a moron tax, the moron being the Liz Truss premiership and that disastrous budget. That has done immeasurable damage to the UK's ability to borrow cheaply, and that kind of has a knock-on effect. Growth is the biggest problem facing the government and the economy. There isn't enough growth inherent in the economy. Labour are basing a lot of their new policies on growth, and without it, they're going to struggle. So it could be hard to see a great deal of change very soon. They're going to try for some low-hanging fruit, but really, the economy it's like turning a supertanker around. It's going to take a while.
There's so many bits I want to pick up on in this, but I know we have a lot of topics to cover, but I'm going to ask a couple of very quick questions on that part. Firstly, you rightly mentioned about the labour market, the tight labour market. Wages have been going up because we don't have enough people to work, right? You've got unemployment has been very low. It's creeping up a little bit, but it's been very low. Partly because a lot of the workforce left the market altogether. We had Brexit, so all of those guys, went back during COVID. One of our biggest issues is we don't have people to hire. And I know from personal experience, whenever you're trying to hire someone, it takes ages. And I don't see the government, whether it's the Tories now or Labour in their policy, I don't see how they're going to be bringing in the talent that we need across the country.
I'll start with this, but I'll let you go. One of the things Samir and I work in a lot of is the leisure industry, hospitality, high-end and fast food. And we are seeing a genuine crisis in, we've heard about it. This is being felt, and so I can echo what you're saying. The answer ultimately, I don't know if we'll ever have time to go into it, but the answer ultimately is closer ties with Europe. I believe that eventually, and I don't know how long they will have, the new government will need to introduce either stealthily or outwardly a closer cooperation with Europe on movement. I just cannot see another way out. We haven't got time
to... They just voted against with Brexit.
That is exactly right. I think the U-turn, or the certain amount of U-turning starts now. The point is you can do U-turns stealthily without anybody really noticing, if they notice the effects are beneficial. At the moment, the only effects noticed out of Brexit, and I'm happy to stand corrected, but the only effects noticed out of Brexit are negative.
Yes.
What we need to see are effects going up, the ends, the goals being achieved, and how they get there may not be crucial. It needs results.
Yeah. And it's and you're right, we have only felt the negative stuff. Somebody needs to turn it around. My worry is obviously Labour's coming in. Most of the people coming in didn't want to leave the EU. In fact, I'm not sure what Keir Starmer's position was on that. Do you remember?
He was a Remainer.
Yes.
But interestingly, as a leader, he was very, very clear about not making any noises about rejoining the EU.
Yeah.
But that's an electoral device again.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't do the deals and the negotiations. The things that were talked about at the outset of Europe are our best friends. We'll be fine with them. But then hard Brexit reared its head, and all of that was forgotten. That whole Europe being our best friends thing, even though we're not part of it, needs to find a way back.
I'd go further than that, and I don't think it's actually just about Europe. I think it's worldwide. I think our immigration policies need a hard look at.
Yes.
And I think specifically India and China, almost half the world there, and really highly skilled,
and
trained
young
people, it's actually getting younger and younger all the time. And I think we need to continue. I think historically England and the UK have been really great places, attractive places to live. And we need to.
Is it still aspirational though? Is the UK still an aspirational?
I think we're at a sort of corner, and it is an aspirational point, and there are obvious benefits to it. But London of course, and other major cities, exactly Manchester, Birmingham. There are some great cities, but I think we're at that point where we need to take a look at ourselves and think, where are we going in the next 10 or 15 years? And we're at a pivotal point right now.
And it's last chance saloon, right?
Absolutely.
We've got to get it right now.
Got to get it right, yeah.
Attract that talent. Great when you mention India, and young talent. I think 65% of the population under 35, or some crazy statistic like that. Yeah. We've got to be attracting that talent. Now, the good thing is, for the moment, people still love the idea of coming into the UK.
Yeah.
Being in the UK, we see the chaos and the mess, but it's still aspirational for people.
Yeah.
But for how long? If we don't use this last opportunity, then, and I think you even mentioned the economic decline. A lot of people talk about the long-term decline of the UK.
It's got to be turned around.
We've got to turn it around. This is our only opportunity. So let's hope that...
The other thing that brings people in is education. A lot of it, talking again about Indians and Chinese, they come here, study at uni, and if it's an attractive enough place, they'll stay.
Yes.
So
as long as we allow them to.
As long as we allow them to.
The 2 years thing, right?
So education and immigration, and those two are kind of go hand in hand and really important.
Definitely. And I think Sunak was kind of veering towards that, but the poor guy's been stabbed so many times from so many places, I don't think he knows what's going on.
I mean, my personal view is he's actually a good leader with some good policies, some good ideas. I like the whole, push maths on people. Let's make the UK a super financially literate place. I think some of those ideas are, we talk about future in the next 10 or 15 years, that would help turn a corner.
Yes.
But
I think he's a good guy, but I don't think you can lead that party as it currently stands.
Agreed.
Well, I mean, look, when your whole party's fighting all the time and everyone's stabbing everyone in the back, it's game over. Yeah, it really is.
Most Conservative voters, I would imagine, probably can't recognise what it is that they voted for.
They don't know what they're voting for. They don't know who's going to lead from one day to another, and what policies are going to be out there.
Yeah.
But I guess the key thing is, what does this all mean for real estate?
Yes.
I'm sure we're going to come on to that. I'm sure we're going to come on to that.
We are going to come on to that, but actually, even before we get onto the real estate, because even before that, I want to talk about inward investment. Now, you guys both mentioned obviously that you deal with an international client base, as do we. What are you feeling from your client base? Are they still looking at the UK as an attractive place to invest?
Yeah. Do you want to start on Middle East? Yeah.
I'll start on Middle East. So the Kuwaiti and Saudi Arabian clients and people that we're talking to, they're the most interested. UAE perhaps not so bullish, but I think generally Middle East, we spoke about it earlier, deep pockets, cash, don't need to borrow a lot, so interest rates don't really factor in as much, and their sentiment is actually this year and certainly the next 12 to 18 months, if they can be a bit brave and enter the market right now when prices are shattered and low, it's a good time to get in. Whereas if you start thinking about it in 12 to 18 months and you get in 24 months, you might have been priced up a little bit, and those capital returns are not, I mean, they'll still be there. London is still relatively safe, but can you get a little bit of that super growth?
Yeah,
and it's not all about London for inward investment. We're finding kind of more sophisticated investment from the Middle East, both in terms of location and in terms of types of work. You mentioned obviously development. You're strong in that area. We're seeing clients more and more from that part of the world interested in new development outside of London, not just picture trophy assets and things like that. We're seeing them actively developing, flipping, doing deals like more traditional investors. So that's certainly true. At least on the US and North American front, which we're quite active in, Europe is very attractive, and Europe includes the UK as a continent, strictly speaking. But of course, the UK is facing competition from Europe in terms of the yields and the things that the North American models are looking for. What we find is that the UK still has some advantages in terms of processing transactions over its European competitors. You mentioned tax, I think.
Yeah,
as well.
there's two things that I'd pick up on that you just said. One about US and one about Middle East.
Yeah.
The US clients they are interested in Europe as a whole, but preferring the UK because we've got a long-standing and relatively easy to understand legal structure, and they prefer that. And the tax structuring, Jersey, Guernsey, all those kind of things are set up better here. And so whilst there may be possibly higher returns to be made across Europe, they prefer the stability and the ease of the UK. That's what we're finding. So that's the thing I'd say on the US. In terms of the Middle East, you mentioned development, and Middle Eastern clients are looking at development. Why is that? Well, I think historically they would just invest and get their 4 checks a year every single quarter. But what we're seeing is because the returns are less, they want to get in earlier and have more slices of the pie throughout. Get in early, spend a bit more money, which they have, and then get.
And they can be patient as well, right? That's the other thing.
They don't need to worry about getting a return within 18 months.
Like a PE fund or something. And it's interesting because I have seen. I mean, in the UK, you look at the stock market, you see it there, but also in the real estate market. I've been reading about this a lot recently. That actually the US is quite active in the UK market, and obviously in the stock market, we've seen they're taking a lot of companies out of the stock market, taking them private. Firms are leaving the UK to go and list over there as well. But certainly in real estate, I think the UK still has this thing, it attracts foreign investment because it is seen as long-term stable. Our laws around real estate are very strong. An interesting thing that I have seen also is in the past, I think it depends on where the investors are coming from, but the Middle Eastern guys, for example, I've seen them do a lot in London. But then you look at something like Manchester, that's all the Chinese. And you kind of see how it's playing out because, London is not, on the face of it, you're not going to make as big a return on capital in a low-risk way in London. Exactly. It's a long-term hold. Long-term, you buy anything in Mayfair, you'll be fine, right?
And that's the
Middle
Middle Easterns have done,
Exactly. So it is interesting seeing these nuances. Are you still seeing a lot of stuff coming in from places like Hong Kong? You know, at one point Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore were very, very active. Are you guys seeing that still?
We've been very active in that space, particularly Malaysian inward investment. We've operated for them the last decade and a half or so, buying a lot of stuff. I personally get a sense that there's been a retraction from that part of the world in some ways, but I suspect what's happening is that the money is thinking in different ways and perhaps becoming a little more sophisticated as well, a bit more restricted. Obviously with Malaysia there was sort of shut down on the use of Malaysian currency. Interestingly, we have just opened in Singapore. Trowers just opened an office there, and I think we went live last month. So the opportunities are there, the appetite appears to be there. We think some of the investors that we would be looking at need a helping hand. I am yet to see across my desk too much evidence of a lot of activity,
right.
But I sense there's a lot of potential. I don't know.
Because all the family offices were moving in at one point, and then that kind of slowed down at one point because the Chinese weren't able to come in, right? Is that
Hong Kong is an area that we aren't specifically close to. So, but I definitely felt we definitely felt that sort of slowdown. And we don't know what the future is, but I think the appetite is there, the connections are there. There's a lot of people. There are a lot of people working out of London, working solely with Far Eastern investors, and they're talking a lot around the place. So there's interest, but we have to get over the internal regulatory things, I think.
Right. Yeah. So look, let's move on to my favourite topic, which is property, right? So let's understand what's going on in the property world. Now, you guys are right there, seeing all the deals on the front line. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked a little bit about, we touched on it, so it's a kind of good segue, but income against capital play. Prices are slashed, there's no two ways about it, and we're seeing that things that we've bought personally for clients, 5 or 10 years ago are now selling for less than they were before. Commercial
or resi?
Commercial.
This is commercial, and this is commercial in the sense of like retail or offices?
Well, retail certainly, but other things
offices
as well. I think the
yeah.
only thing that is consistently above what it was before is sheds, industrial, logistics, warehousing. Yeah. But otherwise, it's touch and go. So I think people are looking at capital as a kind of a secondary thing, whereas maybe before it was the primary. Put some good money somewhere and see it double in 10 years. We would always think double in 10 years, double in 10 years. Yeah. That's not now the outlook. It's now, let's look really hard at the income and the year-on-year return on investment.
Right.
And if we're getting our 7s and 8%, then we're happy.
Okay.
And not worrying so much about the capital because people are not so clearly predicting what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
I think we're in a different world. Again, we keep talking about the UK changing. People can't now just say, well, in 10 years that will double.
That could change again.
Could change again.
At some point, someone's going to call the bottom and say, actually, we know capital will go up, but we're just in a weird world right now.
But also, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, in terms of the capital values, I say these poor investors. These investors have been hit from all sides, right? Because it's not just what's happened in the market. I mean, if you take offices, it's not just COVID and work from home. But actually, with all the new regulations coming in on sustainability, suddenly these lovely buildings, which were income producing and everything, are now harder to rent out, and they have to take discounts on the rent and so on, and capital value drops, right? So there's a lot of headwinds out there.
Yeah.
And it was interesting what you said. Is that broadly what people are looking for? 7 to 8%, what, gross yields?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gross, yeah.
Okay. And are you seeing?
I mean, not in London.
No,
of course, but people are looking, just outside the M25 or big cities,
or even beyond. People tertiary stuff. I mean, yield plays 7 or 8.
It's all
North Wales.
Oh, really?
I mean, it can be anywhere. But it depends if you were a yield chaser like that, or something more what Samir was talking about.
Because again, if you consider if you're using any form of leverage, which most people do. That's not that much above what their borrowing rate is. So
that's the problem.
It's getting very, very squeezed. Hence, opportunity for anyone who's sitting on cash, right?
Yeah.
To come in and acquire these things quite cheap. I'm hearing people are picking up shopping centres at bargain basement prices at the moment, right?
Well, that we were talking about this just a couple of days ago. This is the tough thing right now. I think shopping centres need to change. I keep talking about it. We're in a different world now. You can't just build a shopping centre and have your normal standard, your Nexts, your Zaras. It has to be a bit more of an experience, and it has to have a lot of things to do. When people go to shopping centres, they don't want to go to one shop like they used to. Right. They want to do a few things. Maybe they want to go to a few shops, perhaps a cinema. Maybe eat there as well.
Dinner.
Exactly. Do a couple of hours shopping. Eat, then go home. So it needs to be a bit more of an experience, and you'll always have your Westfields, these prime shopping centres. But other shopping centres need to compete now. Yeah,
and they're almost, you see what some of them are doing now, they're almost becoming entertainment centres, leisure centres. I agree. Which does make sense because they've got a lot of space to use up. So, what is it, the virtual golf and the virtual whatever else, So it's there's some interesting things going on there. But what about on the residential side? What are you feeling about the market?
Quite bullish.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of investor interest in resi. Build to rent market has gone really sky high. We're quite active at Trowers in student accommodation. Okay. And interestingly, student accommodation is there are sort of £86 billion has been invested. 2/3 of purpose-built student accommodation. 2/3 of purpose-built living accommodation is students. So it's a remarkable sort of good news story in a way.
Did you say 2/3?
Let me get the right number for the record.
2/3 of student accommodation is purpose-built,
2/3
and a third is university.
2/3 is purpose-built, 1/3 is at university. The point is, it's 2/3 of the market is purpose-built new stuff. Basically.
And so it's interesting. So I'm going to pick them off slightly separately because these are interesting areas, right? Now, purpose-built student accommodation is probably since. I mean, obviously, when I was a student, student halls were grotty, concrete blocks, and you shared one bathroom between 8 of you or something. That's all changed. Probably since about 2000, a lot of private developments went up for students. Much, much nicer. And that kind of carried on. You almost couldn't go wrong in that space. Until probably the last few years. And we have seen some wobbles in PBSA in some locations. But are you still seeing strong support for PBSA? And are you? I mean, I don't know if you guys deal with the institutional side of this. Are you seeing strong support from that?
We do as a firm. We don't as practitioners.
Right.
So perhaps we're not best qualified to talk about specifically what's happening on the ground on that.
Right.
So I'm in a sense, I can't answer your question, but I can certainly take it away and come back. But
it's an interesting area, right?
But tell us what you think.
No, well, I just think, I mean, look, we have a lack of homes in this country. First off, right? Let's start with that. Now, I don't know if you remember when you were at uni. I think I'm much older than you guys. So when I was at uni, a lot of homes were used as student accommodation. Yeah. And in any local area, that means that normal people can't buy their homes, right? Family homes. So you see in a lot of cities, Nottingham, Leicester, Birmingham, Manchester, where I was, and all across London. So hence, PBSA is a really important thing to come in, so that you move all the students into there and you free up the homes for normal people. My gut feel is there's still a lot more opportunity in that space, simply because I still know a lot of, and that's why I was actually interested in your statistic. I wasn't sure if you were comparing that to the normal homes used as well, and I think that's one that I'll probably try and find out. But how much normal housing is being used for students? Cut into HMOs and.
I think there's still a long way to go. You mentioned about people living in normal homes. I mean, you mentioned a few different cities, but again, add Oxford, Cambridge, Nottingham to the list. I know from experience there are a lot of people just living in normal homes. You get 5 or 6 people sharing one house. You can get a decent sized family living there.
Exactly.
But instead 5 or 6 students are living. So like I say, PBSA has a long way to go, and there is demand for it. That's what we're seeing when we spoke to one of our colleagues briefly beforehand. So we're not experts like Julien says, but the demand's there.
Yeah. And what about build to rent now? So what are you seeing in build to rent on the front line?
So one of the things that our expert mentioned to us beforehand was that what we're seeing is these large-scale developments are doing a bit of everything. because if you put too much build to rent or too much student accommodation, you'll sell half of it, or you'll be able to occupy half of it, and then the supply is too large, and therefore you're shooting yourself in the foot because you're not able to attract that large quantity of people. So there's a bit of everything. These large-scale developments are a bit of student accommodation, a bit of build-to-rent, a bit of affordable housing, a bit of everything.
I also think another aspect of that story is that BTR, institutional investment in this had a bit of a slow start about a decade ago, and is now, I think, very much up to speed. I think there's a real rush towards that. I gather in the last 10 years, £71 billion has been invested in build to rent.
71 billion
in the last 10 years.
That's in the last 10 years. So that one senses that will increase. The question is that the answer? The question is that the answer to our housing problem? And I suppose, it depends which direction you want this conversation to go off into. But are we as a country ready to accept a kind of German approach to living, or are we Englishman's home is his castle still? Questions will kind of need to be asked. And the problem is we don't have a huge amount of choice because we are in a housing crisis, as you've said, and the new government coming in is going to have to find a way to do it. What I can say is that there have been, you mentioned Labour have been cozying up to business.
Yeah.
Labour have also been cozying up to, or having meetings with, for the last 18 months, a lot of housing developers and people that are interested in that area, stakeholders and local authorities. And there is a definite will to have a policy. Interestingly, that policy has not been articulated.
No.
But the question for me is, how will a radical or big housing policy be implemented? And my feeling is that there will need to be a good deal of private-public cooperation.
Yeah. So if they want the private sector's input into this, can I assume no silly things like rent controls?
There will be fairly major concessions to the private. There will have to be. There will have to be incentives and concessions.
Yeah.
So I'm not inside the room. I'm not in these meetings. I hear about them, but yeah, you will probably see a fairly sympathetic landscape because if it was that easy to get private investment in housing, the Tories would have done it. Which having promised it.
Well, and this is it. And I appreciate you may not have an answer to this, but maybe we'll take this as a final question. But in the last 20 years, no government has managed to solve the housing issue.
Yeah.
30 years probably, and it's a big factor is planning. And no government has had the ability, I wouldn't say the guts, because I think the Tories did try at one point, but the ability to go to fight with the NIMBYs, right? What are Labour going to do?
It's not just about guts, it is about ability, and it's about the fact that it's administratively very, very difficult to overturn the planning process, and because it's by nature delocalised or localised, that this power.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer is a lawyer. That's the only positive thing I can say at this point.
Is that good or bad?
And I suspect he will have had to formulate ideas about planning reform, which are electorally palatable, but will sort of cut through a lot. I do not know the answer. I do not know whether they will succeed. My feeling is that they have to, and when somebody has to do something, they generally find a way, and that's my optimistic look at it. Because if they don't do it, I think Labour just will stand for nothing at all.
Yeah, I think the only thing on Labour's side at this point is chances are they'll be winning in a landslide victory. That will give them the power to push through what they need, and there won't be any consequences for several years.
Sure.
So let's hope that they do something with this golden opportunity that they're going to have. So, Julien, Samir, we'll leave it there. I think we've gone through a lot of different topics. We could talk for hours, but maybe we'll have a follow-up session in a few months. But in the meantime, thank you guys very much for your time.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Jack.